Hey friend, and welcome back to the official episode 100. 100 of the Alex Makes VR podcast. Bloody hell, guys. Over 100 episodes, including the bonuses and the mini-series. I just want to take a brief second to be a bit corny, and then I promise we'll get into some interesting mindset discussion and some takeaways, I think, from doing 100 episodes of a podcast. But I just want to say thank you so much to every single one of you listening, whether you've been with me from day one or whether you've recently discovered me and you're going back through the catalogue, whether you found me on YouTube because the algorithm gods blessed me that day, or whether you've been searching on Google for VR related stuff and my face has popped up. However you found me, the fact that you're taking time out of your day to consume this podcast means the absolute world. And it's funny because when I open it, hello friend, genuinely mean that, me and you, we're homies, we're friends. Like, imagine that this podcast is just me and you sitting having a cup of tea talking about a particular subject. But what you guys don't see is the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands of you worldwide, like every continent on this earth. Apart from Antarctica. I don't think we've got anyone from Antarctica listening. But other than that, every single continent, there is someone listening to this podcast. We are all a community. So even though it's you and me, friend, talking right now, it's actually me and you, friends, us all as a global community. And one thing that I want to do more of when I come back from my podcast break for the next kind of, I guess, season of the Alex Makes VR podcast is to kind of start to bring that community together a bit more. I want you guys to meet each other. It's a bit like, when you've got like lots of different friends and they're all amazing and you love them all and you're like, you guys should all be friends, because if I think you're awesome, then you're definitely going to think that they're awesome. And actually, it's just amazing to bring together an awesome community of people that all kind of have the same ideas or ambitions or belief systems or have similar kind of ideas for what they want from life or are bettering themselves. That's an amazing community of people to be around. And the more that we can surround ourselves with people who have a similar kind of outlook on life, the more sane we will stay during these difficult times, but also the more supportive we can be for each other as a community. So thinking about either a Facebook group or a Telegram group, reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter and let me know which one of those you guys would prefer. If you use either of those, if you've got other suggestions, let me know. It's Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. You should probably know that by now. And I'm sure a lot of you do, because we do talk quite often, you and I, on the old social medias. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's talk about some of the stuff that I've kind of been thinking after smashing through 100 episodes of a podcast. And I want to just give you let me start with the takeaway. The takeaway is, spoiler alert, it's never too late to take the first step. It's never too late to take the first step in doing something that you want to do. And that doesn't have to be a drastic life change. That doesn't have to be you're going to quit your stable job and jump into the speculative, fancy, crazy world of VR. That doesn't mean that. That means that you can take the first step towards something that you are passionate about, towards something that is going to be more fulfilling, towards something that is going to give your life that kind of extra meaning, that kind of fill it with that happiness and love and community and support that you might be craving. It's never, ever too late. Okay? And there's this saying in Silicon Valley, and I probably should have looked it up before I started recording, because I can't really go and Google it now without messing up this whole one take situation that I do with these podcasts. But basically the sentiment is that in Silicon Valley, sometimes the more that you... That's it. I've remembered, guys. It's called a sunk cost, okay? The idea that it doesn't matter how much time you spent on something, if it's time to quit, if it's time to move on, it's time to move on. Okay. And the thing is, the longer you do something out of habit, or the longer you stay in a career, the longer you stay in a job, the longer you stay in a marriage, the longer you stay in a friendship, the longer you stay in a particular routine, the harder it is to get yourself out of that, because you've spent so much time in it. You're compounding all of that. You think that if you step away, it'll like you would have just wasted all that time. And you worry about the fact that, oh, wow, I've spent 10 years doing like this career that I'm not particularly fond of. So, but you've got to think of it like in Silicon Valley as a sunk cost. Okay, that's just part of being a human. Part of being a human is doing something for 5 years and going, do you know what? I'm a totally different person than I was 5 years ago. Why on earth would I hold myself to that bizarre standard that I had for myself 5 years ago when I know so much about the world now? I know so much more about myself. I've actually changed so much since I started that particular career or that particular hobby or that particular relationship that actually I need to quit that or walk away from it or take one step in a different direction to be a happier, more fulfilled me. It would be wrong to kind of stay in something that you're not happy and fulfilled by just because you've spent so much time in it already and, oh, well, I've done that now. So like I've spent 10 years doing it. So I might as well just stick to it because now I've got kids and a mortgage and all of this stuff. So really, I can't take the risk anymore. No, don't think of it like that. Don't think of it like that. It's never too late. It's never too late to take the first step in the direction of, and like I say, it doesn't necessarily have to be a career or something super serious or, life-changing. It can be as simple as, you know what, I've always wanted to play guitar. I've always wanted to learn how to code. I've always wanted to do a podcast. Take one step in that direction and just do it. And obviously there's so many things that kind of come together of like the kind of different mindset stuff that we've talked about over the months that we've been doing this podcast, about the idea of like just taking 5 minutes every day to do something, or not kind of jumping in head first and thinking, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, then I need all the equipment and all the employees and all the crew and all the big fancy stuff. I need massive investment. No, just take 5 minutes. Start with what you've got. Like I still, even though I've bought this bloody Blue Yeti microphone, I'm still doing this podcast on my iPhone, just on the voice memos app on my iPhone, pacing around my living room. This is how I've done every single episode, apart from the guest ones, because don't think it would be very fair for them to just see me walking backwards and forwards on camera whilst we're trying to have a conversation about VR. But, you don't need loads and loads of kit. You don't need loads of time. 5 minutes, even if like your life is hectic, you've got because I do understand that like some people have like so much responsibility in life and they've got so many balls in the air and it can feel impossible. It can feel suffocating, the idea of taking a step in the direction. But even finding 5 minutes whilst you're on the loo or in the bath or wherever you get 5 minutes, walking to the shops, whatever it is, take that 5 minutes to take a step in the direction that you will be proud of. Because let's face it, guys, we're all going to die one day. And that's bleak as fuck. But like nothing has kind of shown us our own mortality than this massive pandemic that's been happening. You're going to die one day. And are you going to be more happy and more proud of yourself on your deathbed thinking about, oh, I'm really glad I stuck with that job and life that I hated because, showed commitment to something? Or are you going to think, do you know what? I'm so glad that I took that one step that day to do that thing that I'd always wanted to do, because look where it led me. Look where, and that's the thing, it doesn't have to lead anywhere. You can just do it and it just makes you feel happy. And that happiness that you get transfers over into how you react with your friends and family, which then improves your relationship with them, which then goes on to build like a healthier mindset overall in a household, which means that you end up doing things that you enjoy and you have a happier life, full stop. Like there's so many returns on investments that are not money, that are not a, accomplishment, a career, like fulfillment and happiness. That's the game, people. That's the game. And that comes back to the very first episode I ever recorded of this podcast by myself. The most important thing that you have to do before you start a career or business is to think about the life you want. Think about how you want to feel every day. Think about what your life looks like. Do you have flexibility? Do you have responsibility? Are you a creative? Do you have balance between creativity and admin, logistics, kind of more maths-based work, sciencey stuff, you know, thinking about what does that life look like? Do you work 2 days a week or 5 days a week or 7 days a week because you love what you do? Are you making videos by yourself? Are you making, you know, games in a team? Whatever it is, think about what you want your life to look like first and then reverse engineer. But it's never, ever, ever too late to take that step. And the anecdote that I was going to tell you before I went into that massive ramble just then was the fact that I learned about podcasts back in 2010 or 2011, I believe. And it was a really random way that I found out about them. This was when, I believe it was the iPhone 4 was the model of iPhone that was out then. Or it might have been the 3GS. You remember, like, early generation iPhone, because, you know, your girl's 30, so I've had every single iPhone, right? But I remember I was away for a weekend with a friend at her house in Newcastle, and her dad really wanted to download this podcast app, this new podcast app for the iPhone. It was super new. It was a super new concept, and he didn't know how to do it. And back then, well, still to this day, I'm seen as kind of like the techie one within my friendship group. If there's ever a techie problem, I'm the one that they go to, even though most of the time I just Google it. So her dad asked me, oh, can you help me download this podcasting app? So did that. And he explained what podcasts were to me. And I thought, that is so cool. The idea of like on-demand radio was like wild to me. And it's funny because when I was growing up, my mum was a huge fan of X-Files, and she used to listen to some of the audio dramas in the car on tape. And I remember thinking like, oh, one day that'd be really cool to do like a radio drama or something like that, or like, I don't know, a tape drama or something. And then like to have him say, oh, there's this app now where it's basically like on-demand like audio. And you know, if you cast your minds back to then, Netflix wasn't really a streaming service back then, and you were still very much watching whatever was on TV or watching a DVD. Those were kind of your options. You weren't really able to listen to stuff on demand, which is hilarious, really, thinking about it. You know, YouTube was a thing, but it was only really up and coming, and anyway, very different times. So the idea of being able to have autonomy over the kind of content that you could consume was really exciting to me. And I remember as soon as I wrote a note in my my iPhone notes that have then since synced to the iCloud, and so I can go back to the very first time I was talking about the idea of doing a podcast. But literally, like, how many years is that? That's like, that's a decade, basically, of thinking, oh, that would be cool to do one day or something. And obviously, you know, I finished my degree at uni, then went through my career in television, and then, you know the story by now, like ended up in VR, blah, 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 blah. But throughout the years, as I've listened to more podcasts, and I started to seriously get into podcasts probably in 2015 when I moved to Canada, used to listen to podcasts all the time, like walking around Vancouver. And that was when, again, I kind of like had that spark of like, oh, maybe I should like do something like this. 2015 is when I, you know, started really seriously considering it. And it's taken me until 2020 to do a podcast. And it's obviously not in the format that I would have thought I would have done it in. I would have thought I would have probably gone down the audio drama route. But my God, it took a global pandemic and to have all of my livelihood and my work be ripped off the table for me to actually get around to doing something that I've always wanted to do. And I could say, oh, you know, I wasted all that time, and like, because look how much like happiness and fulfillment this gives me, that, you know, but I don't see it like that. It's a sunk cost. It took all of that experience and all of those kind of like life changes, all of that stuff to make me the person that I am today, so that when I did put out that very first podcast back in July 2020, it took right up until then for me to kind of be like, now is the time to take that first step. And here we are, 100 episodes later. And although I am going to take a brief break from the podcast, I have no intentions of stopping, because I absolutely love this. And that's what I want you to take away from it. It's never too late. It's never too late to take that first step. So do it. Please promise me, pinky. If you're not putting your pinky out right now, unless you're driving, in which case, yeah, don't do that. Just do it when you get out of the car afterwards, you know, look up to the sky, because that's where I live apparently, and put your pinky out and say, I promise, Alex, I promise I am not going to put it off one more day. I promise that I'm going to take a step towards something that I really, really want. And that might sound wooey and a bit over the top, but I cannot tell you the kind of fulfillment that you get when you find something that you've always wanted to try and you do it, and then you get that feeling of like, oh my God, this is so cool. I love this. And of course you go through stages. You've heard it here on the podcast when I've gone through stages of burnout and feeling a bit like, in despair and just not feeling it, not feeling motivated to do it, but showing up and kind of keeping on doing it and going through those periods reminds me even more that this is such a passion of mine. And you never have to be afraid about, getting started with something that you think that you might want to do. And even if that means you do it as a passion for a little bit, and then you go, do you know what? I've wanted to do that for ages, and it wasn't all it was cracked out to be. Like, for example, white chocolate Twixes. I've always wanted to have a white chocolate Twix. Twix, one of my favourite chocolate bars. I don't know whether you'll know that if you're an international listener, but in the UK, Twix is the one, was like, I love white chocolate. So white chocolate Twix, that was the one. And then finally, last year it became a thing. Or was it just before last year? Maybe it was 2019. But either way, white Twixes became a thing. They didn't have them anywhere in the area that I'm from. So when I went to London for a meeting, I sought out this bloody elusive white chocolate Twix. And you know what? Wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It actually was a bit disappointing, probably because I had this idea in my head of how good a white chocolate Twix should taste. Do you see the analogy I'm making here? So I'm not saying that necessarily, you've thought about doing a podcast and you start doing it and all of a sudden it's like rainbows and unicorns. You might be like, actually, that sucked. I really didn't like that. Because often the idea that we have in our head of what something's going to be like and what it actually is like is totally different. It's like in a totally different universe. It's funny, I actually have come to the realization that that's exactly how I feel about making films. I love coming up with ideas for films. And I love having made films. But I hate the process of making films. It's so painful. It's just nothing but suffering. And there's probably you, friend, listening to this right now are like, what are you talking about? Filmmaking is like my happy place. Filmmaking is my meditation. It's my sanctuary. It's everything that I need. It calms me. It makes me feel fulfilled and happy. If that's you, if the process of making films is your jam, then that is absolutely amazing. I'm so happy for you. But my God, there's nothing that I hate more than the actual gritty day-to-day process of making a film. It's so painful. I much prefer things like this, things like podcasting, where you know what, I'm just going off the cuff. I'm shooting straight from the heart. It's got pretty much no technical barriers. It's just you and me. The actual process of making this podcast is happiness for me and fulfillment and cathartic and so many other words. Whereas the process of filmmaking, I love the before, love coming up with the ideas, love getting excited about building a world, building a story, like imagining everything, imagining the storyline, love that part, and love when it's done and I can talk about it and I can dissect the process and I can kind of reflect and I can kind of, put it out into the world and feel proud of what I've created. But the in-between bit, no, torture. Absolute torture, but still going to do it, at least for a little while longer. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say today is basically, reflecting back on 100 episodes, the key thing is I have always wanted to do a podcast and it took me years to do it, but I'm so happy that I did finally take that first step. And it took me a global pandemic, but it doesn't have to take you another huge crisis. It doesn't have to take you as long. If you want to start today, I would really encourage you to just take 5 minutes to take a step towards something that you really, really want, just to see if you like it. Especially because, if you build something up in your head for too many years, like say you've waited 20 years to make your first film and then you make it and you're like, oh God, that was horrible. So I waited my whole life for that. It'd be really disappointing. So, take your first step, take 5 minutes. And then the other thing is obviously consistency. The fact that I've talked about this. I've talked about the fact I've gone through times of burnout and been not motivated, and been sad and just depleted of energy. And I've still showed up and done this podcast regardless, because I committed to doing it. And part of being a professional, part of, building that habit for yourself, part of, pushing through those dark times is by showing up and is by being consistent. And the only reason that I've got to episode 100 is because I didn't put that pressure on myself for these episodes to be perfect, whatever perfect is. We've done episodes in the past about perfection being a myth, so go back and listen to that if you are a perfectionist listening that needs a reality check. But the idea, I said to myself, my goal here is to show up every week and put out a podcast. Doesn't matter what the quality is, doesn't matter what the subject is, doesn't matter whether I sound like I'm high as a kite even though all I'm drinking is a cup of tea and coffee. It doesn't matter if I am, low as a low thing, on the sofa, barely getting through it, rambling, non-making sensicles. As long as I show up and do the podcast, I have completed what I wanted to do. And that is kind of like the bare bones of consistency, right? That is the route to success, is by showing up every single day. It's a myth that talent is everything. Obviously, if you are talented, that's going to take you a long way. I'm not saying that talent doesn't matter at all, especially in the creative industries, but showing up, putting in the work, going for something, never quitting, that is a much bigger part of the puzzle. A much bigger part of the puzzle than people think. So take those 5 minutes every day to take a step towards something that you really want, but also, acknowledge that part of that journey with doing something that you love will be hard. It will not always be easy. It will not always be happiness and fulfillment and excitement. It will sometimes feel like the world is against you. I saw this amazing Instagram post yesterday, which was just like a cartoon character holding, she was like standing on top of the world, and it said, some days. And it was just like this character standing on top of the earth. And then next to it was the earth, and the character was underneath the earth, like holding it up. And it says other days. And that really hit home with me. It's so true. Some days you're going to feel on top of the world. Sometimes you're going to feel like the world is on top of you. But the key is to always show up, and don't hold yourself to unrealistic expectations or standards. Just show up every single day and do something that will make you proud, that will make you take a step towards the kind of life that you really see for yourself. And always recheck in with that goal. Always recheck in. Like, I've changed careers so many times in my short little life because I haven't been afraid to kind of continually check in and be like, is this making me happy? Even at 30, I'm like taking a drastic kind of like change of route because I've found that I really love helping people. I love doing this podcast. I love coaching some of you. I'm really enjoying getting to know the people that I'm working with one-on-one and mentoring and helping them on their journey. And it's crazy because, it's kind of the antithesis of being a filmmaker. Being a filmmaker is quite a selfish trade, where it can be. It's all about my vision, my story, my idea, bringing that to life. It's the absolute opposite is to kind of, help people on their journey to get their success, to make their lives better. But for me, that has been eye-opening, that at this time in my life, that is what is bringing me fulfillment. So you never have to be scared about changing your mind or changing direction or reevaluating what makes you happy, and that will change, and acknowledging that is not a bad thing. These were all just some of the thoughts that have come up over the past couple of weeks of thinking about hitting episode 100. So I hope this hammers home for you. I hope that this was a day that you needed to hear this, my friend, because you're awesome. Whoever you are, like wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, you are awesome. And the only way to be even more awesome is to do something that is true to you, to, make sure that you are living the kind of life that you are going to be proud of. Because at the end of the day, we're all just meat skeletons, aren't we? We're just skeletons covered in meat, made of some atom dust. we bring our own meaning to our own lives, right? And that is, there's no, obviously if you are religious or you have like a kind of like a spiritual connection with like a higher power, I'm not decrying any of that, but you really do have control over your life. And that's quite a scary thing to acknowledge at first, that you are totally in control. And obviously there is the world is not fair. It's not equal. There are definitely some people that have way more freedom just straight from birth than others. But if you are someone that wants to make a change in your life, that wants to pursue a different passion, that wants to take a step towards a life that you will just be truly happy in, you can do that. That is in your control. I believe that with my whole heart, no matter what circumstances you come from, you can do that. So I'm going to stop rambling. This is already 25 minutes. Thank you again so much for being on this journey with me. It genuinely means the goddamn world. I'm so excited for the future of everything with this podcast. Just bought my first flat, aka non-VR camera in years. I haven't owned like a proper, a flatty, I don't even know what you call them anymore because I'm so used to shooting with 360 cameras. A normal camera, a traditional camera. I bought one at the end of my financial tax year because you've got to get that end of financial year spending in to get the tax bill down. And it's the first time I've owned a non-360 camera in about 4 or 5 years. So I'm super excited to maybe start putting out some video content, maybe start putting some more specific YouTube videos out, that kind of thing. But I will, like I said, be taking a very short break from the podcast. I might pop in for the occasional, just check in, like hiatus episode to let you know what I'm up to, maybe a bit more of a journal idea. But I'm going to try really hard to take at least the next couple of weeks off. Might schedule some reruns of some old episodes, some old favourites, like I say, or might just pop in for a cheeky hello and just to pop in and give you some thoughts for the day. But next 2 weeks definitely won't be the usual podcast. But after that, I'll come back stronger, because this was another big thing that I've learned over the last couple of weeks. I saw this Banksy quote that really resonated with me. It said, "When you're tired, learn to rest, not quit." And I thought that was so beautiful and poetic and something that we can all learn from. And it might sound like that is absolutely counterintuitive to what I've just talked about with consistency and showing up regardless. It might sound paradoxical, but hey, isn't that life? But that really resonated with me, the idea of actually it's okay to rest from something. It's okay to know when to pull back, to pull your energy, conserve. Let yourself rest, let yourself recoup, and then come back, rather than going 100% all of the time and getting to the point where you've burned out so hard you've actually just destroyed any passion you had for a particular thing. All of this is just a real messy spectrum of mindset and decisions and things like that. But for me personally, I feel like that's such a powerful kind of idea to learn to rest. So, not you though, friend that's been listening and has done the same thing for 10 years. You don't need to rest. You've been resting by having that sitting in that job that you hate or sitting in that life that you don't like. You need to take that step and start doing something every single day that's going to make you feel passionate and happy and alive. Okay. Enough rambles. If you want to be reminded when this podcast comes back, then please take a moment to sign up to the newsletter at alexmakesvr.com. I'll send out a newsletter when the episodes are back. For now, though, if you want to keep up with me, I'll still be popping in on the social medias. It's alexmakesvr on Instagram, Twitter, and now YouTube. Modest little cheeky following over on there if you want to sign up. At the moment, it's only just the podcast episodes, but soon, like I say, now I've got this flatty cam, I'll maybe start posting some specific YouTube content there, so feel free to sign up over there. That's all I have to say today, my friend. Happy episode 100 to you. Have a great day wherever you are in the world, and I will speak to you in a couple of weeks. Ciao.